Alan Weisselberg headed off to jail. A tiny, tiny little bit of justice, except that it's jail, not prison. It's a 5-month sentence. Spoiler. Let's look at one of my many news crushes, Katie Tur, discussing it and asking some questions that gives me hope that this trend of letting powerful people go with, if only if the Justice Department is forced to give them a sentence, the lightest possible sentence. The patience for this nonsense seems to be wearing thin. Here is Katie Tur.
News out of New York City, where just moments ago, former Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg was sentenced to 5 months in jail for his role in the company's sweeping 15-year tax fraud
she
scheme.
stresses.
NBC's Tom Winter is outside of the courthouse with the details. Tom, was this what we expected?
It exactly was, Katie. And Alan Weisselberg, the former CFO of the Trump Organization, obviously the former president's personal company, the one that has rocketed him to his fame and to his wealth, is now in the handcuffs and in the custody of the New York City Department of Corrections. He'll be headed to Rikers Island, about a 34-minute drive, 8.1 miles from here today, to serve this 5-month sentence, which, when you take into account what is expected to be time off for good behavior, should mean that he gets out in sometime in April. He was taken into custody at 2:36 today after the judge gave him his well wishes, said that he would honor his promise to that 5-month jail sentence. However, the judge says, having heard the evidence in the case, he found it, quote, offensive that Weisselberg's wife received a payment so that she could ultimately receive a Social Security benefit. He said, look, at a time when so many Americans are working so hard to be able to eventually get those benefits one day, he felt that it was motivated by greed, just like the entire case, he says, was motivated by greed. And had he heard that evidence prior to his promise of only 5 months of a jail sentence, he would have gone higher than that. But ultimately, the judge says he made a promise, and so he kept with the 5 months as a jail sentence. Prior to that, prosecutors saying to the court, look,
okay. He's a motor mouth. So I think if that promise had been made to somebody of average wealth, of average power, I would be glad to hear the judge keeping it. A rich person should not get that same consideration. Why? Because the Justice Department, in my opinion, and this is not a lawyer's opinion, this is just a guy that has to live in America. The judicial system in the United States needs to demonstrate that we do not have royalty. And I'll tell you that judge would have been well within their rights to say, you withheld information from me. This was ultimately a case about fraud, and you withheld more fraud. I'm not honoring our agreement because you did not honor our agreement. I'm increasing your sentence, yada, yada, yada. That said, very glad to hear them stressing that it was a 5-month sentence after this guy spent years and years and years playing around with taxes that should have gone to funding America, to building roads and schools, and keeping America running. Spent years, made a career out of it. In fact, 5 months is what he gets. Think of how many people are currently spending years in prison because of the conditions this guy and guys like him helped to create. Despicable. Let's let him wrap it up.
satisfied all the conditions of his plea agreement. He did testify truthfully at trial. He did say that he was this high managerial agent, basically somebody in charge of the Trump organization, helped provide key evidence that effectively put the Trump organization not behind bars, because you can't jail a corporation, of course, but led to the guilty verdict against the former president's company. So this effectively ends this chapter of the case. We have no pending cases remaining on the criminal side, Katie. Of course, the civil suit by New York's Attorney General against the Trump Corporation, the former president and his family members, including his kids, that case moves on, but that's separate from all of this. At the end of the day, Alan Weisselberg, who still, through his attorney, professes loyalty to the former president and thanked the president's family, the former president's family, for their support through all of this, he is now on his way to jail.
Does that mean no more criminal cases could be brought or might be brought against anybody else within the Trump organization in the future?
Well, Katie, Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg said on MSNBC over the past couple of weeks in several appearances that the case remains ongoing. He has said so publicly at press conferences. We have not seen any sort of public indication that that case has been ongoing. What might that mean? Witnesses being called to the grand jury. We haven't heard about any additional subpoenas for documents. We haven't heard about any additional investigative steps. Now, some of that happens in secret, and sometimes we're not always the first to know, of course, as you well know, but we haven't heard any of that since. So the Manhattan DA's office is, look, this case remains ongoing. We're not seeing any signs of that at this point, but of course that could always change, Kate.
I'm really sick of hearing this consolation prize that a civil suit could still happen. I'm just sick to death of hearing the Department of Justice in America dodging responsibility and then having it, this sort of Band-Aid put over the wound by the media when they rush to tell you, but a civil suit is coming. I want to see these people who rob us. I don't care that they rob us with a pen instead of a knife. I want to see these people who rob us given lengthy prison sentences to deter the behavior. I have a very colorful background, part of which includes some criminal justice classes at a community college. And one thing did stick with me, which is the purpose of punishing a criminal. That's part of the training. If you're on your way to be a cop, you gotta ask questions like that. If you're on your way to be a lawyer, you have to consider, what is the purpose of this, other than to get a good shot for the 6 p.m. news. The purpose of punishing a criminal is, number one, yes, to try to reform that person's behavior, to provide negative societal consequence or negative consequence within a society so that this person thinks twice before doing a crime again. Maybe 5 months is enough for Weisselberg. I doubt it, but maybe, if that's all you're considering. It is also to provide a sense of justice for the victims, in which case that is all of us, you and me. Not satisfactory for me. How about for you? Perhaps most importantly, the purpose of punishing one criminal is to deter others who may be considering doing that crime. I cannot fathom that 5-month jail sentence. I realize he's going to Rikers Island, but it's under a year. I'm not going to call it prison. That 5-month sentence not even factoring in good behavior. That 5-month sentence isn't going to deter anybody. That I can't see that as anything other than if you're a rich person being viewed as a green light. Don't worry, America's not changing. You can go on robbing folks. If you get caught after a prosecution, after an investigation and trial that lasts longer than the sentence, you'll be in and out of prison before, I don't know, the next season of House of the Dragon comes out. That's insane. And that is a shame. As always, there's a lot you can do. Number one is, I often tell you to write your representative. Let me tell you this. Make it a habit to write your representative once a week. Just try to build that habit. You will always, always have something on your mind worth talking about. And if something particularly irks you, such as Alan Weisselberg getting a weak sauce sentence for years of fraud, make it their problem. Make it something that they have to be annoyed about all day. Just tell them, I want you to talk about this publicly. I want you, on behalf of me and a bunch of people like me that didn't bother to write you, I want you to say you're not pleased with it. I want you to be an advocate for me wherever your voice is heard. Contacts in the description. If you don't know how this show works, I rely heavily on the description of these videos. I provide usually a brief guide, or at the very least a series of links related to what we're talking about. If you want to know how to contact your representative, if you've never done that before, link in the description. There's a link to all of this, including the source videos, in the description. Take advantage of it. I try to make it as easy as possible for you to get things done. On this, the sentence has been given. We can't increase that now. But you can make sure it doesn't happen again. Make a big splash, make a lot of noise. We did talk on the first stream today about another way you can ensure that the powerful are held accountable. In this case, Donald Trump. They talked about the Trump organization being found guilty. And yet, miraculously, the guy running it was not. Donald Trump spent, I think, last weekend, inciting more violence, trying to get his supporters to overthrow the government again. We ignore it now. We don't even, it's not even headlines when he says this stuff anymore. That's how used to it America has become, and there's just no consequences. If you're sick of that, do note, we have had 2 attorney generals in states that the fake electors plot happened in. We had 2 attorney generals file state charges. Normally, what happens is that, let's see if I can pull that up. There we are. Normally what happens is the state AGs defer to the federal government. Well, last week, Dana Nessel, maybe it was, Friday? Yeah. So last Friday, Dana Nessel announced she's sick of waiting. She reopened the state case. Georgia, with Fani Willis, has been on it since 2021. And they just got out of, what is it? They just, I'm less familiar with the Georgia grand jury system. They have 2 for bringing a case. They just got out of their first grand jury, which seems to have approved the case. Keep up the pressure. If you are from one of the states listed up here, I didn't copy the whole description from the last video, but there is a detailed set of links in the last video. there is a link. If you're from one of those states without a green check mark, there is a link in that video. It's the long stream that's now in the VOD section. For your attorney general, their contact page. Use it. Tell them you want state charges because the January 6th committee named Trump directly as the orchestrator and prime benefactor of the false electors plot. They tried to undo your vote. And in 2022, a lot of the people, including the now lieutenant governor of Georgia, were allowed to be on the ballot again, even though they attempted a coup. Even though they tried to undo your vote, the least democratic thing that can happen in a democracy. Heartbreaking. Don't stand for it. Don't put up with it. Tell your state's attorney general you want a state case opened into the fake electors plot. If you are from Georgia, if you are from Michigan, write your attorney general. There's contact information in that video. And when I re-upload this, it just occurred to me I'll put the contact information in there again. Tell them good job. Because I promise you, progressives do not contact politicians. It's just not in the culture. But I promise you, our dark opposites do. And Dan and Essel and Fawny Willis are getting hammered right now in their inbox. They would love to hear that they've got your support, if they do have your support. Worth considering.